Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Changing the Climate, a show where we talk about the changing world around us and how we can make it better. Brought to you by Climate Change Realty. All right, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode. I am very excited and looking forward to greatly the opportunity to talk to Mr. David Friedlander.
Hey, Ethan, good to be here.
Yeah, pleasure to have you, man. And of course, we always love to get the show started with a little bit of background on who you are and how you got to be doing what you're doing at the moment.
David Friedlander. I am a real estate consultant and developer with a heavy focus on applied innovation. So bringing tech thinking and tech methodology and tech processes and design best practices and applying that to every phase of the real estate development process, from high level climate and economic data down to below the ground structural data, and looking at every step in between and applying big data, the latest bleeding edge technology, design best practices from history and around the world, and bringing it into the built environment. So I'm the CEO of a startup called the Change Order Group, and that's what I've been pushing that that boulder up the hill for almost 2 years now. So that's the high level stuff.
Cool. Where are you from?
I actually did a spreadsheet the other day with all the places I've lived. So I got roughly. Well, no. I'm not going in all 38. Yeah. So I mean, regionally, I can kind of boast that I'm sort of a local to a lot of places. First 16 years in the Chicago area, mostly south suburbs, and then occasionally north side of Chicago. I moved to Boulder in 1992 with my father and stepmother, and was here from 92 to 2001. And in between that, I kind of I traveled a lot as a young man in Boulder is wont to do. So I spent like almost a year and a half away, lived on a kibbutz in Israel, and did a lot of bike touring, and traveled to Alaska and blah, 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 blah. So, and then from 2001 to 2020, I lived in New York, mostly in the city, in Manhattan and Brooklyn, occasionally making extended trips to the Hudson Valley. And then I've been here for since like September or something like that. Cool, and I mean, like the nature of my work is around innovation and housing. That's kind of the thing that I've known for. The last few years, I was just doing pure consultancy. I established myself as, I think, one of the preeminent, if not the preeminent, housing innovation experts. I worked with Lowe's Home Improvement Innovation Group. I worked with IKEA's Innovation Group, and became really a nodal point in the what's called the prop tech world, property technology, construction technology, MMC, which is modern methods construction, and then new operating models. And anyway, people, if you wanted to know what was going on, people came to came to me. I don't think it's anyone in the industry. I don't think that would be an unfair thing to say.
Right on. Yeah, well, we're happy to have you on the show, man. Thanks for coming. I'm just curious what you're doing back in Boulder. You're like a New York guy, it sounds like, these days.
Yeah. I mean, so I mean, we talked about this before.
They don't know that.
I'm
though.
Here. Yeah. I mean, the kind of the PG version is or PG-13 maybe.
Let's go PG-13.
PG-13 is I'm regrouping here after a gnarly divorce, and also having a bit of a a very public. I mean, I don't know. It depends on who you're talking to. People on the outside would say it was a breakdown. I'm talking
to you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, like,
I don't care what people say. I care what you had to say.
yeah. So, I mean, like a couple of years ago, I realized that that no one was taking climate as seriously as it needed to, and that was the genesis of the change order group, my current endeavor, which is recognizing that no one in the development world, and just in the context of what I mean with that is, I was in New York. Most of
Mm-hmm.
the stuff I was focused on was large multifamily property, so uh, residential and mixed use, and but I had my hand on a lot of beats, and in terms of what was going on nationally in terms of development patterns. I had done a piece about the various housing crises for Dwell magazine in connection with this exhibition called Making Room, that talked about like the increasing mismatch between demography and housing stock, and what I was finding, like basically housing household sizes, the number of people living in a home was getting smaller,
Mm-hmm.
and then our homes are getting bigger.
Really?
And oh, oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I can tear into the numbers a little bit here,
That's
but
domestically in the U.S. You're talking about generally that data.
oh yeah. I mean, this is like, yeah, this is no mystery. I mean, like in 1950, the average new single family house was less than 1,000 square feet, housing like 4.5 people. I just looked it up in generally it's around 20. The median's single family home is around 2,500 square feet nowadays, and
Mm-hmm.
the household size now is like 2.54. Yeah, and no,
Yeah.
I think it was 3.64 before, something like that. Anyway, the point
Numbers.
is, yeah, well, but I mean, like these are really big. I mean, these are important numbers, because it's like all of a sudden people are taking up, a gargantuan amount of space, and it's in and it, all right. I have to kind of like get back on track here. What was the original question here?
Well, we got a lot.
The story. Right.
Yeah.
So the story. Right. So 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 people were like, so I'm I'm the guy who like tries to figure out the right way of doing things in real estate, right?
Sure.
and 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 pays attention to the data, and like a lot of it was and, and and one of the more influential things for me starting up the change order group was I have a buddy, and his name is Issy Romem, and he was the outgoing. He runs a consultancy called MetroSite now. He had previously been the chief economist over at the Zillow Group, and previous to that, he had done a lot of work at Build Zoom, and also he's a Turner Fellow at the University of California, Berkeley, right? One of the top housing experts in the world. And he did a real influential article about expansive versus expensive cities, right? And essentially, America has got into this pattern where we create affordable housing, not by design, but just by spreading out. That's how we do it. We just keep on building out. And he did a really thorough job of just covering the landscape of how we got into the situation we're at, which is for almost anyone, I mean, for very few people would not call it a crisis, right? A housing crisis, an affordability housing crisis, right? And what I found was that, we had all this information about the things that exacerbated, well, first of all, sprawling single family housing, which is America's de facto affordable housing scheme, is an abomination for the environment.
Mm-hmm.
We're using up every last little bit of land, whether it can support life or not. We've completely overdeveloped areas that are really not, and again, like I'm talking to the climate scientists, I'm talking to the economists, and they're saying, no, this is going to make things worse. And what I found was that the developers, the people in charge, and let's go back to 2019, and my descent out of New York,
Mm-hmm.
the people in charge at the very, very highest level didn't give a fuck.
Can we
they're like,
elaborate? These are the people who are buying buildings or developing buildings? Who is the? Because when we say the people, I want to be more specific.
yeah, yeah,
Who's
yeah,
not
yeah,
giving
yeah.
a
I mean,
fuck?
these are,
Because it's
yeah,
definitely
I mean,
not
these
me.
are,
It's definitely not you.
yeah, it's kind of a stew of what I would call capital market investors and developers, and it is kind of a hazy line,
Hmm.
and essentially because real estate has become so commodified, the people who are essentially these buildings, whether it's a large multifamily tower in New York City or Seattle or something like that, or it's a single family housing tract in Tempe or something like that, Tempe, Arizona, or Phoenix, or Utah, which has seen almost 19% growth since 2010, right? And all just like sprawl, and essentially, who's financing that? They're created not as a housing solution, but as a financial product, right?
Absolutely.
At the high level, they're just looking, how can we make these things into more efficient money making machines, and and
No,
and
of course, that's what an
and and,
investor is
and
thinking about.
well, but I mean, it's interesting that we've become so passe about, of course, and it hasn't always been this way, and it's happening such to the detriment of the operation of the building, and the tenants are being shuffled around, and so many people are being thrown under the bus or left out on the street. And I've done a lot of stuff around homeless advocacy, mostly in San Francisco, and um, and and I realized no one was going to do anything. Like, not like, and I was hanging out, like I had a rich girlfriend at the time, like after, and and I was hanging out in these crowds in like the hills of Connecticut. You're an East Coaster,
I'm an East
and
Coaster. I'm
yeah,
also
and
a
hanging.
huge fan of Ray Dalio and Bridgewater. His
Well,
book Principles is my favorite book.
yeah. Well, we can
That
touch on
that's
that in a
that
minute, but
that's that crowd over there in Connecticut.
yeah, yeah.
Hedge
So
fund
they're all like,
billionaires.
well, that's the thing. Like, I didn't realize it's a very, very small world, and it's getting smaller and smaller. And they talk about each other, and they talk about shit. And I didn't realize that when I said things, like, it mattered, and I was like waving this flag. I was like, all these, and to this day, this problem's still existing. There's 101 million vacant square feet of commercial real estate in New York City right now.
Is that
It,
related to the pandemic or before that kind of
this
thing?
was so before. I mean, the pandemic like was a nail on the coffin, but it was
Hmm.
this situation. People were leaving New York City in record numbers for the very same reason. For this very same conditions that we can talk about that are bearing down on Boulder.
Yeah.
And it's the investment class, and it's generally older, wealthy, a lot of boomers, and they just and they're just like holding on to the real estate. They're holding on to the money, and the planet is literally on fire.
I,
And
I agree.
yeah,
So before we get too deep into like the intricacies, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how you got like interested in environmentalism to begin with.
sure. Yeah, I mean, you sent me some great questions, and I never consider myself an environmentalist, and this is where I can start talking about
Sure.
my father.
Please do.
My father, yeah. So my father's Dan Friedlander, who a lot of people know in Boulder. He passed away in 2012, but was really prior to his death, established himself as a force of nature in terms of climate activism, and a lot of the kind of the bluing of the state, if you will. Uh, and he, before he passed away, really established himself as a huge community leader. But to me, of course, he was dad. you know, and we he came. This is some of the joy of or the I don't know the joy, but whatever. The benefits of the lockdown is like I actually got time to start investigating my past and my family's past, and I have this term I call the banality of greatness, and essentially,
Like
like when
benign
you no
banality.
banal, essentially there's an expression, the banality of evil, but for me it was like I grew up in a pretty awesome, I mean, like in a pretty amazing family. A little bit crazy,
We all are.
but not like the Friedlander. But no, I mean, we're eccentrics, right? But for almost in like with for reason. Anyway, so so my father was a huge activist all throughout his life. He basically grew up into a card carrying communist background. Our family was in Hyde Park, Chicago. There was a huge white flight, but we stayed put in. I mean, this is my father, his sister Spring, who would later become like this force of nature in East Bay housing and uh, LGBTQ T politics. And anyway, and so he came from this deep radical background, and at one point in time, he didn't like me saying this when he was alive, but fucking A, he's dead. He can't say anything about it now. He was called the second most dangerous man in America by J. Edgar Hoover. And most of that wasn't necessarily for his communism, but he turned it into the SDS, Students for Democratic Society.
Mm-hmm.
Was a leading figure at the University of Wisconsin, which is one of the large, and then went on to get his master's of econ at University of Chicago, where him and my aunt like took over the school, and like in the days of Milton Friedman. So anyway, long story short, my dad always came from a very European background, and I just grew up around this notion of being conservative by nature, and
Mm-hmm.
reverent and reverent to nature. My father was, and one of the reasons why we moved to Boulder was to enjoy the outdoors. And my father, was a very scientifically minded guy, but had an appreciation for nature that was bordering on religious.
Yeah.
So my dad, it's funny because later in life he built this like fancy house and shit like that. But the father that I know is the one with like, he used to shop at the thrift store for all his clothes. He rode this shitty ass bike with like the cage of the pedal was falling off, and so it was in my blood just to be conservative, and to look at how my actions impact everything. He would always kind of encourage me to go a step deeper in terms of the impact of my behavior. And anyway, I mean, he was just dad to me.
Yeah.
And I just just forged these habits that I kind of just assumed everyone had, but apparently not. So anyway, like
Definitely
uh,
not.
in my father's later life, and that like really I went back to school later. I went to CU for a couple of years and dropped out, and then when I moved back to New York, I went back to Columbia and took some classes on climate science. And then between me and my dad, and my dad was extremely informed about that, uh, between the two of us, like, and this I mean, this contention only stands if you're not completely mortified or by climate change, you just really don't understand the science. And it was something I recall from a class at Columbia. It's like, generally speaking, like whether it's the pandemic or various other things, the public is always more freaked out than the scientists. But with
Mm-hmm.
the climate science, it's just the opposite. For decades now, the scientists have been far more alarmed than the public. And each year, what happens, rather than there being a response, is we get used to greater and greater levels of environmental instability. And
Resource consumption. Yeah.
Well, no. I'm talking like we're just getting used to we're getting used to
Oh, like,
fires.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We're getting used to droughts. We're getting used to climate migrations. We don't name them that, but like all the stuff at the border, no one wants to talk about. It's like, oh, it's too damn hot, and the land doesn't support. Um,
Food.
so um, so my interest, you know, my interest. I mean, I like my father. I revere the earth and the cosmos and everything that keeps us afloat. And like I want to be around, and I have children. I have two boys, and I want and I refuse to give them all the work. When I know that there's work to be done in my
Mm-hmm.
lifetime. And
Yeah.
while I'm able-bodied.
Cool, man. Yeah. So let's talk about it. What's Change Order Group? Why are you starting the company, and what's the goal?
Yeah. So the change order group, essentially, I think I might have said it before, but like I did a report about the future of housing for the Lowe's Corporation a couple of years ago, and uh, it allowed me to do like essentially a global survey of innovation. What was good in housing, and also what were the threats, because large corporate entity needs to understand the things that are coming at them. And So I got privy to a lot. There's essentially the media a lot of times will want to say that there are not solutions, right? There are not technical solutions, there are not legislative solutions, there are not economic solutions. And yeah, right. So um uh
They can't see me
the
rolling their eyes, but you can.
yeah. So yeah, Ethan appropriately rolled his eyes, and I was like, no, here. And I think this is one of the it's one of the beauties of I've got a mixed like my dad did. He had he was a tech guy for his whole life, but he had a very mixed relationship with technology just because of its accelerative effect, of destructive
Totally.
environmental forces. But the one thing is nice is that you can do information sharing, and there are people that are there are municipalities, there's technology out there that we can do this right now, because
100%.
the time to respond is right now. And one of one of my big aha moments was a couple years ago, and in my limited little world, and which is like real estate's a whatever $7 trillion,
A
$3 trillion,
behemoth.
yeah, behemoth. So my little world, like there's a lot of a lot of ripples when an influencer says something.
Mm-hmm.
um
And all
but
the all the generational wealth is flowing through real estate as well. So all the big dogs are tied into real estate as well. It's the big mover of the market.
And they're backed by these bonds too, and like that's where it gets really controversial, and like it's really dicey, because everything's backed by these commercial bonds that are supposed to be like the gold standard of security, and all of a sudden the commercial real estate industry has been hollowed out. you know Again, these are like not super popular things to say around capital markets, and then they say like, oh, but we don't but we don't, but there's no, there's nothing we can do, or the only thing we can do is just the only thing we can do to build more affordable housing, this is like a big one, is oh, there's a housing shortage in Boulder County. Let's say there's a housing shortage in Boulder County. Let's just capital markets just wants a place to deposit its money. It's called dry what do you call it, dry powder, or whatever they call it, like that. It's basically uninvested private equity. So
Mm-hmm.
these are reliable investment products. So they just they want to they want to do those things instead of doing the right thing, right? And to claim that there are not solutions to these things that the government needs to get on top of 10 years ago. you
Beyond a
know
doubt.
10 years ago, the house is on fire, and it's been on fire. And if you don't know that, it's because it hasn't come to your house yet. You know,
Mm.
so there's tons of things that the legislation can do to increase diversity, economic diversity, racial diversity, can do climate preparedness, a lot of it's happening in Europe, but we can look at I don't want to be I don't want to like be totally Eurocentric. Like the average Indian lives with like something like 14th of the GHG emissions of an American. Even with their population, they're still spewing out less GHG than the American, and
Sounds right.
that's including all the greenhouse gases they absorb for us by making our shit.
Wow.
Um, yeah, totally. Like in China, I know that's the case.
Yeah.
And so,
It's a
anywho,
wild world, man.
yeah. Um, so my whole thing was like, no, if you say there are no solutions, it means you are invested in the non-solution. And like when there's so many people benefiting from the upside of other people's downsides, that downside is going to keep going, and that's what's happened with COVID. Is there's been this huge wealth transference, and a lot of
Hmm.
the and a lot of the wealthiest people are going to really nice places to live,
Yeah.
like Boulder.
Yeah. While we continue
uh,
to suck the resources out of the planet and push the temperature up. But I'm curious, like,
yeah.
what the mission statement behind your group is and how you guys are
Yeah.
going to achieve it in like a pragmatic
Yeah.
way.
So for sure. Yeah. So we're putting it all together, I mean, actually really what we want to do is work with developers, and this is a sales call. We're looking for progressive developers and investors who want to redirect their capital flow, because it's not as hard as people think it is. It really just takes choices, to do something different, in terms of cranking out a different real estate product, pushing on a few levers, in terms of policy change, because a lot of time, a lot of the stuff, in terms of, so what we're focusing on is putting the best like making the best real estate, and the way I like to say it is doing it the right way, every time,
Hmm.
and essentially what happens is, like, oh, if you can only afford $1,500 for a one bedroom, you don't get the good HVAC system. Sorry, you know, like only the Colorado climate, what is it, the new climate, or the new
Action plan.
code. Oh, it's a joke. I want to say that summarily. It's a joke. and
Yeah.
and
Okay.
and the building code, net zero for houses 3,000 square feet and up. Are you fucking kidding me? You can leave that fucking in.
Oh,
you
beyond a
know,
doubt. Oh, yeah, I'll leave it in, man.
it's so geared towards rich people, so wait a minute. So what we're saying is, like, we don't need to have these half-ass solutions. If you
Yeah.
talk to the change order group, if you have a lot, or you're a municipality, or you have a building, we can say, hey, we're gonna do the right thing, in terms of high level climate data, which is something that's going to be increasingly relevant in terms of where we're gonna build. The West Coast was on fire last summer. Drought
It's,
conditions are 10x worse this year.
it's coming back,
Like
man.
it's coming back, and it's coming back harder.
Well, every
10
year
million.
it's a compounding effect. It's a positive feedback loop. Climate change.
Yep.
The more gas
Yep.
you put in, the harder it
Exactly.
gets. The more
10.
gas comes out. That's why
Yep.
it's so
So
scary.
yeah, and then like we're still overdeveloping, and whatever, in Frisco, and all these, and so people don't, so we're looking at the data, and we're gonna, and if there's like a developer or investor intrepid enough to really go, I mean, it's just going against the flow of blind, willful ignorance,
Yeah.
and lack of forbearance to the risks of affordability, which is a huge social risk, but then also, and it's just wrong, and understanding the climate science, and designing buildings, and really planning, around the actual climate science, not around some hopeful scheme, which is what's happening right now with the climate action plan, which is in essence, it's tied to connect with, it's like sponsored by Excel. It's
Yeah, yeah.
all about replacing the status quo, replacing combustion engines with EVs, and replacing the windows on single family housing. It's like it ain't gonna work.
But it's better than jack shit, isn't it?
Nope. No, it's
No?
delusional. No, we don't have time for this shit. We
I
don't
know,
have
but
time for
it's
this.
yes, but it's better to have a half a step forward than 3 steps back. Come on, man.
We don't have time for that.
Well,
We
we got.
really don't have time for
Here's what
that.
I want to ask you. I know, I understand we don't have time for that. I agree with you, but we've got to negotiate with these people at the table. I wanted to ask you, how do you think we can get these these big money people, the people who have lots of wealth, to care about this issue and get their money? Maybe not make, if their
We
ROI
don't.
would be.
We don't. They created the problem, and they just need to be. We just need to put a label on shit and say this is what's happening.
How,
No,
but how are you going to get anything done with the people who have 99% of the power are against you, or are
you get
looking out for
that.
their
You
own
get.
interests?
I get. I'm
Are you
talking
going
to
to call for? Are you
you.
going to call
Whoever.
for
Hold on.
revolution?
Well, no, I'm talking to one person to do something. Like, I believe in the power of the individual, and I believe
Okay,
that
me
one
too.
developer might get it, and like it might talk to us and my team. Like, we have a full retinue of people. I come from a marketing background, but my one of my partners, Greg Lindsay, comes from a policy and policy and innovation thing. He's over. He's still the director of innovation at New Cities. I've got a team that we're really able to steward a developer through the process. My other colleague, Mike Eliason, is one of the top, low embodied and operational construction experts, also social housing, and knows a ton about eco districts. And there's so many things that a developer could do, but they have first of all, they just have to say, no, I'm not going to build another generic greenfield development.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna like, hey, I'm gonna do the thing that might be a little bit inconvenient, or I've got a bunch of ideas. Like, there's some development sites in Boulder, that could lend themselves to sort of easy wins in terms of demonstrating that real estate doesn't have to be this thing that is a social economic divider and a blight on the environment. You know,
Totally.
it's happened. It's happening, and but it's just not happening. It's happening almost like really nowhere in the United States. It's embarrassing.
Sure. So I'm asking, I'm with you. I want more action. We're way behind. But what you just said is, like, if you can get to one developer and let's say they do everything that you advocate, you thinking that's going to spread like wildfire once they see that it works well, is the idea?
Yeah, I mean, American real estate has gotten so decoupled. It's become like this investment tool, and it's
Beyond a
become
doubt.
decoupled. It's no longer a product anymore. So even the people who have these humongoid homes,
It's a
like,
business.
they're, yeah, but they're not. I think it's a very questionable benefit to have these large homes, and that's the thing that, like, that's been always been my job, and, like, it's what I'm talking about in this minimalism movie. It's on Netflix. But I'm talking about, like, our spatial usage, right? So we don't use we. It's impossible for 2.3 people, which is like the average household size in Boulder, to use the whatever 2,800. Like, new houses now are like,
Uh-huh.
5,500 square feet for single family,
Yeah.
because all the international wealth is coming here, so the houses are skewing huge, and and it might be, like, it's really about changing the culture. I think it's
Sure.
vulgar. I think it's vulgar to have a house half the year in a high, in a
In,
high access area, and while the people who feed you, the shop workers, have to travel 20-25 minutes just to get home. I think it's vulgar. You know,
I hear you, man. And you're not
and
alone.
well, yeah. The only thing I'm a lot more lonely than I want to be.
You just need to talk. You need to talk to more people who are in your wave, man. Go check out the past episodes.
Well, no, I've talked to, and and bringing that, I'm like, I no, I've been talking to, when I first got in here, and nothing is a better example of like, just like, oh, it's so gross. I mean, God bless bedrooms are for people, but it's so embarrassing to me that they have to struggle so hard to get on the ballot. It's a war on on poor people or normal people, you know.
Sure. Nothing in life
Um,
is easy, man. You got to put in work to get change, and that's why I like what you're doing and getting people together. I
but
think I think the tide is changing. Go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, no, I mean, it's like these we need more education. We need groundswell, and like I said, we need one, really just one developer, like, to do something different. We're going to do something special, and people are given there was a great article several years ago, and it was like, why even driving through suburbia is a soul sucking experience.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, I'm an urbanist, and I believe that we should design our cities in a way that you don't have to own a car to to get to work and to do the things that you need to do. And on the outset, you need a bike to do it. If you want to, and in the article, what it was talking about is like, when you go to Europe and there's, it's like kind of this je ne sais quoi, of, and the reason why people, go into the, go to Paris, or to whatever, to Florence or something like that. It's the accretive knowledge of thousands of years of how people like exist in harmony with nature, in harmony with each other. And we're not doing that. We've completely ignored that.
What is that? What would that look like? You talking like cycling to work? What else?
Well, some of the buzzwords right now are 5-minute cities, or 15-minute cities. So essentially, you could kind of walk, 15 minutes the distance of the city. And Boulder is such a perfect, perfect place to roll this out. And this is why, one of the reasons why we moved from suburban Chicago to Boulder, because my father, appreciated, and he never drove anywhere. He hated driving.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he did live in single family housing, but he told me, if he had his druthers, he would have lived in a small apartment downtown.
Right.
There were other forces at play. So
Very cool. You
um,
go ahead.
yeah, no, you go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to hear a little bit about your podcast. What you guys are talking about on there?
Yeah, so it's a change order, and essentially what we're doing is, so I have a group, and you can go to changeorder.group, and we are we're kind of like the A team of real estate. Both from
Oh yeah.
a research standpoint, like I mentioned, Issy, who's running Metro Site, Greg Lindsay. I have my partner, Thomas Kosbau, who's an amazing master planner, architect, transit guy. Mike Elias and Derek Borowski, who is essentially the head of design at WeWork, like really went through their evolution. And my boy Matt Hoffman, who he's in DC. So we have a distributed team, and the through line with and Michelle Knapp, who's doing a huge passive house retrofit system. So the through line with my group is that we've gone as far as one can get in this kind of new skewed reality where real estate is purely a financial vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So wait. Give me the question again.
What are you guys talking about on your podcast?
Oh, on the podcast. Yeah. So we're just starting with this right now, but the big thing is, like, again, when you shook your head, it's like, we don't have solutions. There's not there's not enough. There's not a talk about this is the solution. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the content formats we're doing right now is just the slowness of real estate. Like things don't happen quickly in real estate.
Sure. I can attest
So
to that
even
for
if
sure. But building the
yeah
business from
yeah
scratch.
yeah, and building a building is just like it took me 10 years. And you asked about how I got into sustainability by birth, but I
Mm-hmm.
got into real estate like in 2011 through this startup called Life Edited. And we were trying to do micro housing development. And it was like the intersection of lifestyle and real estate. And, like a minimalist lifestyle, you can't live in smaller places just kind of like buying everything you want, and nor would you want to. So we were, that was that's how I got and like my dad got into tech into 1971. I got into real estate because he told me he was in teaching before. He needed to make some money. He had a couple kids on the way, and he said with tech he couldn't see like the ceiling on it, right? He like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's basically in 2011. That's how I felt about real estate. That's still how I feel about real estate.
Certainly.
There's really no limit to it.
Sure.
So anyway, rather than relying on people to say like, hey, we just need to build another single family housing rental track, right? Which is super popular, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
Americans no longer have enough money to buy a home. So rent out their home. It's a very popular investment vehicle. Multifamily rentals, like you'll see, on the periphery of Boulder, in Longmont, Superior, and whatnot. Those are very unpopular investment products for capital market investors and developers. So what we want to do, we want to say, hey, instead of like fucking up the earth, and creating more sprawl and just creating more and more commute times and creating more and more economic division, because essentially, all the housing, right, for in Louisville and Superior and whatnot, I'm just using Boulder as an example,
Mm-hmm.
is designed for the people who are, working and maintaining Boulder, instead of doing that, like instead of just doing another, generic greenfield multifamily development, hey, how about we densify? I got my eyes. I would love to develop Table Mesa in Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
Put some residential of it. It's a transit hub. You could get people and actually make Table Mesa into a proper pedestrian friendly area instead of like just like a parking lot with the accoutrement.
Yeah, it's very
So
road based for sure.
yeah,
You can't
yeah,
get anywhere without driving.
Boulder.
Yeah, well, like that area as well.
Well,
I mean, it's like
oh,
the road
oh,
isn't crazy. You try to turn in left into the shopping center. It's a bit of a hassle. Yeah.
no, it's not a hassle. It's dangerous. People just scream through it. Yeah, I mean, so, so yeah, doing it the right way. And then also like, just, really informing people of what's going on. I don't, I can't see how people countenance it, like they just put up with it.
For
It's
sure.
wrong,
I hear you.
and it's not it's non-scientific too. The way that the development patterns and the actual what's actually happening in the ground in the U.S., but in Boulder, which should be a climate capital, is completely retrogressive. Single occupancy vehicles are still way the hell up. I'm
Totally.
still like, my bike is always so lonely on bike racks. They've built up this amazing bike infrastructure. The bike lanes are constantly empty. Traffic fatalities are up. It's like people need to stop doing this incremental stuff, and it can't be sponsored by big oil and gas and Excel.
Cool, man.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing all your thoughts about that. It really means a lot. I have to go back and think about that more. And then you definitely connect with a lot of the people I've had on the podcast in the past. But before we end, I really want to get a chance to talk to you about something that you mentioned a couple times. And you call yourself the father of modern minimalism. You said that you had some like Netflix special that you were on, and so obviously I'm one of your children. It would appear. So I want to hear you talk about this a little bit. Tell me what's minimalism. Why is it appealing to you? Why do you call yourself the father? All that stuff.
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm pretty antithetical, or like I'm opposed to labels, and I'm kind of grossed out, to be honest
Love
with
that
you. About,
response. I love that response.
like a lot of the labels that if people have affixed to me, minimalist, YIMBY, um,
Yimby?
yeah, YIMBY, yes, in my backyard. Oh, that's funny. It's funny you had like Eric Budd and all those guys on you don't know that term. Yeah. No, it's basically the sort of it's a controversial movement about um, deregulation or upzoning for the interest of creating more uh, affordable housing, mostly in urban centers,
Okay.
which so uh, uh, I try to move away from from labels because it's just like you go over. I've got like 10 pair of running shoes, right? I'm a runner.
Mm-hmm.
Like if like I'm sort of a zealot of minimalism, I'm gonna feel tweaked out about that. Except I also live in like 150 square feet, and like my footprint on everything is negligible. But I just happen to like running shoes,
Yeah.
um, but be as may. So backtrack and and minimalism in some, just to be very clear, is like in some way, shape, or form it's part of a continuum of thought that's been around since time immemorial, right? So, but I think in terms of its recent popularity, which is like evidenced by like the Netflix thing, and I think it was just the general trend towards, especially with like millennials starting to question whether they wanted the big house and all that stuff, and and now you see like all this kind of hyper commodified version of it with the sprinter vans and like very pared down life. Um, um, but in 2009, I was on the cover of I was on the cover of the New York Times real estate section, and I just basically I've done like I said, I've lived in 38 different living environments, and at the time I was living in a semi dilapidated townhouse in Brooklyn Heights, which is a very fancy neighborhood. And this would be a theme for me. It was that I've always taken on bizarre living situations to be in the right neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Because my life doesn't necessarily center in my house. It's like where I go to sleep. It's where I shit and piss and like and a few other things. But it's like but my life is, and I think this is again something that's probably inherited a lot from my father. My life is civic life. Really, it's out in my work. It's out in the public. I'm a runner. It's out in nature. My house is and if I have to like upkeep my house then and I have to take care of my house and I have to work to pay for it, then it's really cutting into my quality of life. So I forget what my exact quote was in the New York Times, but it was something on the order of I was living in this very stripped down existence, and looking at what are the things that I need to be happy, and in this hyper commodified world of ours, where everything is seen through a lens of social media or some sort of hashtag, like people don't like they've lost sensitivity to what actually works for them, and what they really need. People like I've heard this all the time because of the Fed is just basically, they're like, the Fed's just said, hey, we're just going to keep on running this line of credit indefinitely. That's essentially what it's saying. And
For
the whole
sure.
world is following it. It was like, hey, America's doing it, so let's do it. So, and why are we doing it? I thought like the COVID lockdown, it would give us some pause. Like, start thinking about like our Amazon lifestyle and all this stuff, people seem to have doubled down on it.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Consumer spending is back up. I thought that like, it's shutting down the supply chains would reduce consumerism, there's like no reflection. So wait, so yeah, so no,
Minimalism.
no, no, yeah, no, no, and like with housing, people with the Fed, I was saying, people are upgrading their houses. Like everyone's, upgrading their houses. Like, oh,
Yeah,
because
a lot of that's going
because
on.
yeah, you're a realtor. I mean, like, and I mean, you're gonna like, there's always gonna be something to sell in Boulder. Don't worry, and
I'm
what
not worried about my career at all. I'm worried
yeah,
about the whole world calling to shit as we've been talking about today. And I think if
100%, right, right,
more and more people realize that what's most important in life is the relationships you have with others and your involvement in the community, they'll start taking care of themselves instead of focusing on consumerism and being depressed in their 3,000 square foot
and,
house.
and the planet and food, and
Mm-hmm.
like and those to my mind are things that need an education. Like I think this is all an education. If people understood the science, they wouldn't be so proud of themselves for getting that Tesla as like as their thing. It's like, oh, check. I took care of the environment. I got a Tesla, and oh, I got some PVs on my 6,000 square foot house. Like it's not nearly sufficient. It's not nearly enough. Like at this point, we need all hands on deck. And so the minimalism thing. Um, uh, I had this thing in the New York Times, and a couple years later, I was working. I was working alongside this dude, Graham Hill, who again was, and he has like a couple TED talks, and we worked together at this site that he started, Tree Hugger, um, and and then I started up the blog for this company, Life Edited, and I think it was pretty influential. For about 4 years, I was keeping a newsletter and talking about trends and actually looking at happiness studies and positive psychology and all this stuff, and actually really looking at the impacts of consumerism, both obviously on a planetary level, which is consumer culture. I think it's consumer goods are essentially responsible for like 70% of all GHG emissions, and
Sounds
and
about right.
and in our housing, what in our housing is basically like, and I think it's all connected because we get these bigger houses and then we fill them up with shit, right? So and our housing is obviously another place where we can make so much progress in terms of reducing our the human footprint. Um, but wait a minute. So wait a minute. Consumer goods. Oh yeah. So minimalism. So we were at Life Edited. Yeah, and then from there, like I think the minimalism thing really took off. And a couple exponents, the minimalists, who these dudes who made the movie on Netflix, and I think it actually made an impact on the discourse, like how people orient themselves. I don't think didn't go nearly enough.
It's getting
Um,
there, man.
well, I mean, I thought but it lacks all these people. It's like it, everything becomes so it becomes commodified, and I have different, like, I think the minimalist guys are kind of, their message is hollow now. It's like it can't just be about removing stuff. We have to really talk about what are we doing in the absence of false motives around, and essentially a lot of it has to do with like proving our power and our worth through accumulation of capital, accumulation of real estate, and not finding power from within.
Well, what I'd like to say is what I've found from willingly removing stuff from my life is that it's brought great clarity to me, and I'd be able to reorient myself towards things that I think are more virtuous or bring more value into my life. So I don't think it ends with just stripping
Yeah.
yourself down and having nothing. I think you really are kind of reborn when you strip all this conditioning that society has had, that you need to get the Tesla, you need to have the big house, you need to have the big car. Once you strip yourself away from all these materialistic things and you go back to who am I and what am I here to do, that's when your big revelations start happening. That's when you actually start feeling like, oh my God, I know exactly what I should be doing because I'm not distracted by all this, like you called, shit piling up in my garage or my mind, even more importantly, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, 100%. And the just the ambient amount of attention that most people pay to their house, to their car,
It's meaningless.
to their well, it's like, it actually, it's vampiric, right? It actually
Totally.
sucks, because then, like, oh, what am I doing besides maintaining my house? And unfortunately, again, like, the way that housing is being developed nowadays, it's actually being built crappier, with cheaper materials and stuff like that, so people can work more on their houses, and this is like the classic examples, like the lawn, like, people, first of all, they don't statistically use them. I happen to know that, based on
It's
some
so
research,
bad, man.
and then it's just like to keep toxic chemical companies and lawnmower companies in business. And uh,
I'm just so deeply concerned about the amount of fresh water that we've been wasting for decades. Watering lawns is just crazy to me.
Yeah,
But
yeah, potable water. Yeah, to
the
maintain a status symbol.
the most valuable resource in the world. Literally, I'm walking down the street a couple days ago, just being sprayed out for aesthetics. Now, people don't think about this stuff, and now that I see it, it blows my mind. But
Right.
yeah, man, it's been really great talking to you today. I just wanted to ask you what advice you have for like young people coming up during this current state of affairs where everything's kind of like, fucked. So like, how can we unfuck it? How can the young people really get involved and help out?
Boy, I mean, we obviously don't have time to touch on it, but like, I come from, I believe in like a concept of God, and
We'll
I
talk
believe in
after the
right.
podcast.
Yeah, I believe in right and wrong,
Hmm.
and like, I believe harming the earth is wrong, you know, and I believe colluding with systems that keep people homeless, in system, like when I walk into a restaurant and everyone who's in there is white and everyone behind the counter is brown or poor, um, so I think my big thing for young people is like, stop believing the bullshit the government's going to do it. They don't fucking they're at odds, in generally speaking, with the planet and with people. It's a very thin crust that's mostly interested in protecting other crust members. So it's really about personal responsibility, and it's about doing things like bedrooms are for people, like really fighting to not let it descend, like keeping that conversation and keeping aware of the real issues, really understand, and then just taking personal responsibility. Like that's the whole thing with this, like minimalism, or whatever the hashtag of the day is. Or rallying around a political party. For a lot of people, it has meant a pass on really understanding stuff, and for young people, like, don't believe what you hear, like, believe what you see. Next, like, we're if you were around last summer, like, if you missed the red skies,
Mm.
open your fucking eyes. And California is going to get so much worse. um the whole Great Basin is in a massive, essentially west of here. The Front Range is okay right now, but there's a lot of, I've heard this number from experts, that essentially the high water, that we've gotten this spring, creates more brush, and the extreme temperatures are actually going to increase fire risk. So, to my mind, like it's Russian roulette right now. I don't own a home in Boulder right now, and
Optimistic, positive advice for the youth, David. Something to hype them up. Make sure that what can they do to help?
Well, it's when you start taking action and start taking a stand for stuff, like all of a sudden the anxiety and despair goes away. We can't do anything about the climate. The drivers are it's happening. It's inexorable. Most likely California is going to be a desert. Like within 10, 15 years, large, massive population migrations. We can't change. I mean, we can do something about it, but there are facts on the ground, and like standing still and waiting for government and waiting for our elders to do it. And that was like, that was the thing that happened a couple of years ago. I was like, no one else is going to do it. And I had this kind of epiphany, and I love Greta, right? I fucking love Greta. She just like, she talks truth, and she like talks about real numbers and whatnot, but she's a 12-year-old, or no, I don't know how old she is. She's probably 16 or 17 now.
Yeah.
She's 16 or 17 or something like that. Swedish, like, why is she getting all the, I mean, can I get some airplay too? I'm a 45-year-old male, who's like one of the top technicians in terms of applied innovation. And I have a whole team ready to roll out, essentially a response to what I think is a, unequivocal climate emergency. And the media still wants to say, hey, we don't have solutions, or or there's going to be too much kickback there's going to be too much pushback, with rezoning, for example, which I believe absolutely need to do in Boulder, for example. And I could, I could parse this out for various regions. It's all region by region, but in Boulder, it's like, it's set up. It's just more haves and have-nots. What the sales price has gone up.
Average hit $1 million in May.
It's
April actually.
It's 1.5 now, man. I think, and it was 800 before.
So sales for the month of April, the average price was $1 million in Boulder.
Okay, all right. So I show 1.5 too. But okay. Yeah. I mean,
it's from the MLS.
Yeah, but but also sales price versus asking price, because everything's going way over asking.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy. And in May of 2020 it was 872. And that's acceptable.
It's a wild real estate market, man. But I think what you're meaning to say is that individual action is powerful. If we get together and we all take a stand, we don't need to wait for the government. We can get out there and do action on the ground, and we can make this stuff happen. We can save ourselves from a fully apocalyptic scenario.
Well, here's another thing. Like, get into the, here's like the YIMBY, and like a lot of the activists don't want to get into the trades. I'm in the trade, I'm in the real estate development world. Go work for real estate developers. Like, so many people have all these great opinions, but like, there's a ton of people. We need carpenters and like, and support people who are doing good stuff in real estate. And it's all about personal, really just personal choice. And honestly, like, we're talking about the Great Lakes. There's going to be climate migrations.
Mm-hmm.
So go north.
They're coming. Go north, but try and help everybody else out. Cool, man.
But in the meantime, I'll just do a little sales pitch. Changeorder.group, and we're looking for. Here's the thing. Like, we are trying to change the system. It's in the name. And we're trying to give people good options. When you go to my buddy Mike, he talks about all the time, but like in Germany, they have social housing set up. In Vienna, 80% of the house, people live in social housing. And these are not like, and they're people of all different classes, and they mix together. Like real estate doesn't have to be this bad. Like American real estate is so awful, and it just doesn't need to be. So if you're a developer, investor, or anything like that, we're itching to get into it and really design a science-based and just doing it the right way. Like there's so many things that can be done to create more equitable, sustainable society, and we just need someone who's willing to go a little bit against the grain. These are so that's the pitch.
Yeah, and I'm 100% certain you're gonna get them, man, and I'm gonna help support you for doing that. And I appreciate you for coming on the show a lot, man. It's been great talking to you, and I'm more than happy to talk to anyone else from Change Order Group on the show at any point.
Word. Thanks for having me, Ethan, man.
My pleasure. All right, everybody. Hope you have a great weekend, and we need your help. So get out there and do some good work for us, because as you can see, me and him are both kind of freaking out about the situation. So we could use all the help we can get. So everybody, take it easy. Peace. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Changing the Climate, the official podcast of Climate Change Realty. If you are very passionate about these issues and you know anyone considering buying or selling a home anywhere in the USA, then please visit ccrboulder.com today.